How many times have you already lost a man's interest just because you confessed to him exactly how you feel? If you already feel a lump in your throat right now, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you give me 5.5 hours of your time today, by the end, you will hold the strongest tool in your hands to awaken male desire and to keep it alive forever. But beware, I won't sugarcoat anything for you. The truth hurts, but it sets you free. Subscribe to this channel right now, activate the bell, because together we will expose the most destructive myths about love. And share this video with your girlfriends who desperately need to hear this. Also, write to me in the comments whether you've ever made the mistake I'm about to reveal to you. But first, a little introduction. Men don't value what they get easily. They value what they have to fight for. This is a neurobiological fact that has been deeply ingrained in the male brain over millions of years. So make sure to stay tuned, because what comes next can change your love life forever. In my 30 years as a cognitive behavioral therapist, I've seen thousands of intelligent, successful, and beautiful women destroy their relationships with just one sentence, with a confession they thought would bring them closer to their partner. But in reality, it pressed the self-destruction button of their relationship. Do you know what that sentence is? I love you more than you love me. Or even worse, I can't live without you. When a woman says that, she unconsciously gives away all her power. She admits that he has total control over her emotional well-being. And believe me, men can smell desperation from miles away. But let's look at this step by step, because the explanation behind it is scientifically fascinating. The male brain is programmed for the hunt, for conquest. When a man feels he has you completely secured, that there is nothing left to conquer, his reptilian brain interprets: mission accomplished, time for the next challenge. It's cruel, but it's reality, and denying it changes nothing about human nature. Before feminists criticize me now, let me clarify something. I am not justifying this behavior. I am explaining it. Because when you understand how something works, you can use it to your advantage. That's the difference between being a victim and being a strategist. In Colombia, where I grew up, my grandmother always said, "My son, a man who doesn't have to fight for a woman will never value her." And she was right. Many women confuse love with possession and intimacy with emotional dependence. And I'll tell you something I've never said publicly before. Years ago, I had a patient, let's call her Esperanza. She was 52, divorced, professionally very successful. She fell madly in love with a man and decided to go all in. She confessed to him that he was the most important thing in her life, that without him, she didn't know how she could go on. Do you know what happened? Within 2 weeks, he started to distance himself, not because he was cruel, but because his primitive brain interpreted no more mystery, no more conquest. Esperanza had gone from being a challenge to being a certainty. But men don't fall in love with certainties, they fall in love with possibilities. And now comes something crucial. This doesn't mean you should become cold or manipulative. It's about preserving your dignity, your mystery, and your own life. It's about loving him without losing yourself in the process. The secret lies in neuroplasticity. Your brain can reprogram itself to act more wisely in love. But first, you need to understand why women tend to confess too much and too soon. Women are taught that expressing feelings is a virtue, that emotional honesty is the basis of a stable relationship, and that is mostly true. But everything has its right timing. If you reveal your whole heart and your emotional dependence in the early stages of a relationship, it's like laying all your cards face up on the poker table right away. Men, on the other hand, are socialized to be more emotionally reserved. That doesn't make them better or worse, just different. And once you understand these differences, you can navigate love life much more effectively. Do you see what this is really about? It's not that men are incapable of deep love. Their love just works differently. Men love what they respect, and they respect what they cannot fully possess. That is why, my dear reader, the most destructive confession you can make is to reveal your complete vulnerability and emotional dependence. In that moment, you stop being his equal partner and become his emotional burden. Let me tell you something else. Men also fear abandonment, but they express this fear differently. When a man senses that a woman clings too much to him, that she is too dependent, his emotional survival instinct kicks in, and he begins to create distance to protect himself. Do you know what the irony is? The more you chase a man with desperate love confessions, the faster he runs in the opposite direction. It's like water you're trying to hold in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. Before we continue, I want you to do something for me. Go to the comments and tell me if you've ever experienced this. Have you confessed too much and suddenly noticed how everything changed? Your experience could help another woman who is going through the same thing right now. The paradoxical truth of modern love is this: to be deeply loved, you must preserve your emotional independence. To be intensely desired, you must remain a mystery worth unraveling. And to be truly valued, you must never give away all your power at once. This is not a game, this is emotional survival strategy. In Mexico, where I've given many lectures, women keep asking me, "But Mr. Rizzo, how can I love without completely surrendering myself?" And my answer is always the same. To surrender does not mean to lose yourself. You can give your heart without giving away your dignity. The difference lies in the intention behind your confession. Do you declare your love to truly create a connection, or do you do it to force his presence? Do you do it out of inner fullness or out of inner emptiness? Because here lies the core of the matter. When a woman says, "I can't live without you," she's not talking about love. She's talking about emotional dependence, and no one feels attracted to someone who needs them to survive. That's too much pressure, too much responsibility. Men are attracted to women who choose them, not to women who need them. Between these two positions lies an entire world. To choose means freedom, decision-making power, autonomy. To need means dependence, desperation, lack. And here comes the part you may not want to hear, but absolutely must understand. If you feel that you cannot live without him, then the problem is not him, it's you. An emotionally healthy woman can love passionately without losing her identity in the process. A stable sense of self-worth allows you to love out of abundance, not out of scarcity. It allows you to say, "I choose you," instead of "I need you." And believe me, men can feel this difference energetically. When I was still working in my practice in Bogota, women would often come to me and say, "Mr. Rizzo, he changed after I told him I loved him." And I would always reply, "It wasn't him who changed, it was you. You went from being the huntress to being the prey." And that is the cruel truth of love. The moment you reveal your complete vulnerability and confess that he is your everything, you shift the power balance of the relationship. And even though love should be equal, attraction follows completely different rules. Attraction thrives on uncertainty, on mystery, on challenge, not on total control or absolute security. That's why the most passionate relationships are those where there is a balance of power, where neither partner has complete control over the other. Do you remember that feeling when you first met someone you really liked? That thrilling uncertainty about whether he felt the same for you? That excitement with every message? That anticipation before each meeting? That is pure attraction. But what happens when he already knows for sure that you're crazy about him, that you'd do anything for him, that your life has no meaning without him? Then the uncertainty is gone, the mystery vanishes, the challenge is over. And unfortunately, attraction often disappears with it. Here comes something fascinating that I discovered after many years of research. This doesn't only apply to men. Women too lose interest when someone is too available, too eager for our approval. This isn't about machismo, it's simple neurology. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter for pleasure and motivation, is released most strongly when the reward is uncertain. When we know for sure that the reward is guaranteed, the brain loses interest. As simple and as cruel as that. That's why casinos are so addictive. That's why social networks captivate us so much. And that's why relationships in which there is a balance of power are more passionate and lasting than those in which one partner gives away all their power from the start. But let me make something clear. This doesn't mean you should become cold, calculating, or manipulative. It's about preserving your emotional center, your own life, your own dreams. Even when you love intensely, it's about loving maturely, not desperately. Mature love says, I love being with you, but I'm also fine without you. Desperate love says, I can't be without you. You are my everything. Do you see the difference? One stance empowers you, the other makes you a prisoner. And here comes an insight that will change your perspective. Men want to be loved, but by a woman who loves herself first, because only a woman who knows her own worth can truly recognize the worth of another person. If you don't have a stable relationship with yourself, how can you have a stable relationship with someone else? If your self-worth depends on his validation, what are you really bringing into the relationship? This is the most beautiful paradox of love. To truly love another, you must first love yourself. To be chosen, you must first choose yourself. To be valued, you must first value yourself. And when a woman enters a relationship from this inner strength, everything changes. She no longer seeks him to fill her inner voids. She no longer needs his words of love to feel complete. She is there because she decided to be there, not because she has to. That is the woman men respect. That is the woman men value. That is the woman men don't want to lose. Let's go even deeper, because I want you to understand the psychological mechanisms behind this. When a woman confesses all her love and emotional dependence, she activates in the man what psychologists call the rescuer's burden. Suddenly he feels responsible for your happiness, for your emotional well-being, for your self-worth. And that is a heavy load for anyone, because no one can be responsible for another person's happiness. That responsibility lies only with you. When you tell a man, you are my everything, you're unconsciously telling him, I am your responsibility. And most men, no matter how much they may love you, will eventually feel this burden as overwhelming. It's as if you handed him the remote control to your entire emotional world. But men, my dear, don't even want that remote control. They want to love a woman who is happy without them, who is complete in herself, because only then can they love freely without carrying the weight of being responsible for your happiness. That's why it is so important that you truly understand this principle. You are responsible for your own happiness. He can enrich it, he can intensify it, he can complement it, but he must never be the only source of it. When a woman understands this and truly lives it, she becomes irresistible, because she radiates an energy of wholeness, of inner abundance, of emotional strength, and that energy is magnetic. In my years as a couples therapist, I have observed one thing over and over again. Women who preserve their mystery and their emotional independence are not only more desirable, but also have longer and more fulfilling relationships. Why? Because they keep their own lives, their own interests, their own circle of friends. They remain interesting to their partner, they have new things to share, their own experiences to tell, their own perspectives to bring in. But if you give everything away and turn yourself into his shadow, if your whole world revolves only around him, you become predictable, transparent, boring. And boredom is the silent killer of every relationship. Men fall in love with women who surprise them, who challenge them intellectually and emotionally, who make them grow. They don't fall in love with women who worship them and have given up their own identity for them. And here is another important insight. When a woman preserves her emotional independence, she also keeps her sexual magnetism. Because sexuality is closely tied to personal autonomy. A woman who is complete within herself, who has her own dreams and ambitions, who doesn't constantly need her partner's validation, radiates an enormously powerful sexual energy. It's the energy of someone who consciously chooses to be there, not of someone who has to be there. And men interpret this autonomy in their primitive brain as genetic strength, as a valuable female worth conquering again and again. That's why, my dear reader, the secret is not in never confessing your love, but in never confessing your emotional dependence. And you can tell him that you love him, but never tell him that you cannot live without him. You can show him your affection, but never your desperation. The difference is subtle but crucial. I love you comes from the heart. I can't live without you comes from the fear of abandonment. And now I want to share something personal that helped me truly understand this subject. Years ago, I was in a relationship where my partner was emotionally extremely dependent on me. She kept telling me that I was the most important thing in her life, that without me she wouldn't know what to do, that her entire happiness depended on me. At first I felt flattered, even powerful, but over time I began to feel the pressure as suffocating. I felt like I couldn't even be myself anymore because every tiny change in my mood would deeply affect her. I couldn't even have my own difficult moments because her well-being depended on me. This experience taught me firsthand what it means to carry the emotional burden, to be everything for someone. And I assure you, that is not romantic. It is exhausting. Men need space to breathe, space to be imperfect, to go through their own inner processes without feeling that their partner's happiness depends on it. They need to know that if they have a bad day or need time for themselves, they won't emotionally shatter the woman they love. And that is why an emotionally independent woman is so attractive. She allows a man to be human, imperfect, vulnerable, without the pressure of constantly being the emotional support system for someone else. And now comes something that may sound counterintuitive but is absolutely true. The moment you stop desperately needing his love is exactly the moment when you receive the most love. The moment you stop emotionally chasing him is the moment when he starts chasing you. That is the law of attraction in its purest form. What you cling to tightly slips away. What you embrace transforms. But be careful. This is not a game of manipulation. It's not about pretending indifference while you're breaking inside. It's about developing real emotional independence, that inner abundance that allows you to love from strength and not from lack. And to achieve that, you must work on your self-worth, on your relationship with yourself. You need a rich, fulfilling life that doesn't depend on any man, your own dreams, your own goals, your own circle of friends, your own sources of joy. If you have all that, if your life is fulfilling on its own, then you can love without clinging. You can surrender without losing yourself. You can commit without disappearing. And that is exactly the kind of woman no wise man will ever want to lose. Now, I want to talk about the cognitive distortions that lead us to confess too much in relationships. One of the most powerful is confirmation bias. When we're in love, we tend to interpret every positive signal as confirmation that he feels the same. And that is exactly what gives us the courage to confess our deepest feelings. But here lies the problem. Men can be tender, attentive and romantic without being ready for a deep emotional commitment. If we misinterpret these signals and confess our total love, we put him under pressure to go into an emotional depth he may not be ready for. Men generally process feelings more slowly than women. While we may move from attraction to love within a few weeks, they often need months to reach the same point. If we confess our deepest feelings before he has reached that point on his own, we create pressure and overwhelm, and that can make him withdraw. That's why it's so important to respect different emotional timelines. It's not about being calculating, but about being emotionally wise and respecting the natural process of how men fall in love. And here is another crucial concept: gradual emotional reciprocity. Instead of confessing everything at once, it is far more effective to reveal your feelings gradually, in proportion to how much he reveals his. If he tells you that he really likes you, you can say that you really like him too. If he says that he's starting to feel something special for you, you can say you feel the same. But if he says, "I like you," and you respond with, "I'm crazy about you, you're the love of my life," you destroy that emotional reciprocity. This imbalance creates discomfort and can make him feel that the relationship is moving too fast, or that there's an emotional gap that puts him in an uncomfortable position. Men value emotional symmetry. They want to feel that they are on the same emotional level as their partner, not that they're several steps behind and forced to catch up. And now to something many women don't understand. Men are just as afraid of rejection and vulnerability, but they express that fear differently. While women often express their fear By seeking emotional security and declarations of love, men tend to protect themselves through distance or emotional walls. When a man realizes that a woman is more emotionally invested than he is, his self-protection instinct kicks in. He thinks, if she's so in love with me and I'm not yet sure of my feelings, I could really hurt her. Better to keep some distance until I'm clear. Ironically then, the very confession you make in order to create more closeness often produces the opposite, more distance. That's why it's essential to develop emotional patience. Feelings must be allowed to grow naturally, without pressure, without rushing, without trying to control the other person's timing. And here comes a truth that hurts, but that you absolutely need to hear. If you have to confess to a man how much you love him just so that he values you, then he's not the right man for you. The right man will value you for who you are, not for how much you need him. He will fall in love with your strength, not with your weakness. He will choose you because he admires you, not because you worship him. And when you find this man, you won't feel the desperate need to declare all your love to him. You will feel secure in the relationship, appreciated for who you are, loved, without ever having to beg for that love. Because here lies the deepest truth about love. True love is not begged for, it is earned. It is not chased, it is attracted. It is not demanded, it is inspired. And a woman who understands this and lives by this principle will be irresistible to men of quality. Because she radiates the energy of someone who knows her worth, who is not desperately searching for love, and who is ready to give herself only to the one who deserves it. Let us imagine together what a woman looks like who has developed this healthy emotional independence. She is not a cold or distant woman, but warm-hearted and at the same time self-assured. She is loving but not needy. She shows affection but not desperation. This woman has her own interests, her own friendships, her own career or projects she passionately pursues. When she is with her partner, she enjoys his company to the fullest. But when she is alone, she enjoys herself just as much and feels complete. She doesn't constantly check her phone to see if he has written. She doesn't cancel her plans just to be available for him at all times. She doesn't sacrifice her dreams for the relationship. She doesn't lose her identity in the process of loving. And paradoxically, this exact type of woman is the one who awakens the greatest passion and strongest desire in men. Because she remains a mystery worth unraveling. She remains a challenge worth mastering. She is a woman who enriches a man's life instead of becoming an emotional burden. Men fall in love with women who enrich their lives, not with women who depend on them just to exist. And now, my dear reader, I want you to do an exercise in honesty with yourself. Think back to your last important relationship. Did you confess too much too soon? Did you reveal all your vulnerability in the hope of creating more intimacy? Did you lose yourself in the process of loving? If the answer is yes, don't condemn yourself. Most of us women have gone through this phase because we were never taught to love wisely. We were taught that love means total surrender, absolute sacrifice, the loss of our own identity in favor of the couple's identity. But mature love is something else. Mature love means two complete people who choose to share their lives, not two halves desperately trying to complete each other. Mature love says, I am happy with myself and with you I am even happier. Immature love says, I am only happy with you, without you I am nothing. Do you see the difference? One attitude comes from abundance, the other from lack. One attracts, the other repels. To develop this mature love, you must first work on your relationship with yourself. You must learn to be alone without feeling lonely. You must build your own life, your passions, your strong and independent identity. Only when you are happy with yourself can you love without clinging. Only when you feel complete can you complement another person's life without being dependent on them. And yes, that requires inner work. Sometimes it requires therapy, a lot of self-awareness, the development of emotional intelligence, and a healthy sense of self-worth. But every minute is worth it, because if you achieve this, you will not only attract better relationships, but also lead a more fulfilling and satisfying life in every area. Now, I want to tell you the signs that you are confusing love with emotional dependence, because it is crucial to be able to distinguish the two if you want to love in a healthy way. You can recognize emotional dependence by the compulsive need to always be with the other person, by the fear when you are apart, by the feeling that your life has no meaning without him. You recognize it when you lose your own identity, cancel plans, and sacrifice relationships just to be available. Healthy love, on the other hand, can be recognized by the fact that you enjoy being with the other person, but not out of desperate compulsion. You feel good when you are together, and you also feel good when you are apart. You keep your identity, your friendships, your interests. In emotional dependence, there is desperation. In healthy love, there is conscious choice. In emotional dependence, there is fear of abandonment. In healthy love, there is trust in your own worth. In emotional dependence, there is the need for control and constant reassurance. In healthy love, there is the ability to flow with the natural uncertainty of relationships. And here comes something crucial. When you are in the mode of emotional dependence, every confession you make is colored by that desperation. Men sense that energy of lack, that vibration of neediness. That is why it is so important that before you confess anything, you ask yourself, am I loving out of abundance or out of scarcity? Here comes a concept I especially like: emotional self-dependence. It means that you, yourself, are the main source of your well-being, your self-worth, your happiness. That you know, no matter what happens in a relationship, I will be okay because I have a stable relationship with myself. When you develop emotional self-dependence, you can love deeply without clinging desperately. You can commit without losing yourself. You can be vulnerable without becoming dependent. And this emotional self-dependence is reflected in your language, in your behavior, in the energy you radiate. You no longer say, I can't live without you, but I love living with you. You no longer say, you are my everything, but you are a very important part of my life. Small changes in language that reflect big changes in your inner attitude. And now I want to tell you about the so-called mirror effect in relationships. When you have a healthy relationship with yourself, when you value and respect yourself, you automatically attract people who also value and respect you. It is impossible for someone to treat you better than you treat yourself. It is impossible for someone to appreciate you more than you appreciate yourself. That is why working on your self-worth and emotional independence is not only important to attract better relationships into your life, but also to deserve them. Because here comes an uncomfortable truth. If you have low self-esteem, if you don't value yourself, you will attract men who confirm exactly that. Men who treat you badly, who don't respect you, who play with your feelings. Why? Because unconsciously you seek relationships that reflect your inner belief. If you believe that you don't deserve love, you will seek men who don't really love you. If you believe that you must beg for love, you will find men who make you do exactly that. That is why it is so crucial that before you seek the love of others, you build real self-worth. Before you expect others to value you, you must make sure that you value yourself. When you do this inner work, when you develop strong self-esteem and healthy emotional independence, you no longer feel the compulsive need to confess to a man how much you need him, because you don't need him to be happy. You choose him because he enriches your life, not because he fills your inner voids. That is the difference between love out of abundance and love out of scarcity. And believe me, men feel this difference energetically. In all my years of counseling, I have observed a pattern. Women often confess too early because they want to accelerate the emotional intimacy of the relationship. They believe that if they reveal their deepest feelings, he will also open up, and the desired deep connection will be created. But intimacy cannot be forced. It develops naturally over time, with trust, with shared experiences. If you try to accelerate this process with premature confessions, you often achieve the opposite. Instead of closeness, you create pressure and discomfort. Men need time to process their feelings and build trust. If they feel pushed too early into emotional depth they are not ready for, they respond with distance. That's why it is so important to respect the natural rhythms of emotional development in a relationship. Intimacy grows layer by layer, experience by experience. And here is a very powerful strategy. Instead of constantly confessing to him verbally how much you love him, show it through consistent actions. Men are, emotionally speaking, more visually oriented than auditory. They process love better when they can see and feel it, not just when they hear it. Be loving without being clingy. Be attentive without being overwhelming. Be warm without seeming desperate. Show your love through small, everyday gestures, through genuine presence, through support in difficult moments, but always from a place of inner strength, not from neediness. The difference lies in the intention behind your actions. Do you do it because you truly want to express love, or do you do it because you want to secure his feelings for you? Men intuitively sense this difference. They can distinguish between a woman who loves from abundance and a woman who clings from lack. And now, my dear reader, I want to reveal to you the most powerful secret to keeping a man's interest long-term, your constant personal growth. Men get bored with women who become predictable, who they completely know, who have stopped growing and developing. But they remain fascinated by women who remain a mystery, who surprise, who continuously evolve. And if you have your own projects, if you are constantly learning new things, if you are gaining your own experiences, you stay interesting, you keep bringing new topics into conversations, fresh perspectives into the relationship. But if you give everything away from the start, if your whole world revolves only around him, if you abandon your individual growth, you become transparent, predictable, and unfortunately, sometimes boring. Men want to grow with a partner, not carry the emotional burden of a woman who has stopped evolving. They are looking for a companion on equal footing, not someone emotionally dependent. That is why it is so important to preserve your own dreams, your own goals, and your personal development, not just for the relationship, but above all for yourself. Because you deserve a rich, fulfilling life, independent of any man. When you live from this mindset, when your life is already fulfilling and rich on its own, then every man who enters your life will be a beautiful addition and not a desperate necessity. That is the difference between being the protagonist of your own life and being a supporting character in someone else's. And believe me, men are far more attracted to protagonists than to extras. Now, I want to explain something else that many women don't understand. Men's fear of commitment is not a fear of love. It is a fear of losing freedom and individuality. When a man senses that a woman wants to completely merge with him, that he should be her everything and she his everything, his survival instinct kicks in. He thinks, if I fully give myself to her, what will happen to my own dreams, my friends, my identity? That's why independent women are so attractive. They show that it's possible to love deeply without giving up your identity, that you can commit without losing your freedom. An independent woman says to a man, you can love me without losing yourself. You can commit to me and still remain yourself. You can be in a relationship with me and still pursue your own dreams. That is a much more attractive message than, love me and I will be your everything, and you will be my everything and will need nothing else in life. Men want to complement your life, not be your entire life. They want to be important to you, but not the sole source of your happiness. And here, my love, comes something crucial. When a man feels that he could lose you, that is precisely the moment when he values you the most. Not because he is cruel or manipulative, but because that is how human psychology works. We always value more what we could lose than what is guaranteed. That is pure emotional economics. And when you show him that you don't desperately need him, that you would be fine without him if it came to it, then he understands that he has to make an effort to keep you in his life. This doesn't mean you should threaten him with breaking up or play emotional games. It means that you preserve your worth, your dignity, and your own life, that you make it clear to him, I choose you, but if you don't choose me with the same intensity, I will still be fine. That is the true position of strength in any relationship. knowing that you can be happy on your own, regardless of what happens with this particular person. And when a man feels that you are with him because you want to be, not because you have to be, then he values you in a completely different way. He respects you more, desires you more, invests more effort into you because he knows a woman who values herself, who has options, is a treasure not easily found. And let me tell you something personal that helped me deeply understand this principle. In one of my past relationships, my partner constantly told me that I was the most important thing in her life, that she didn't know how she could live without me, that her entire happiness depended on me. At first, I felt loved, appreciated, important, but over time I felt enormous pressure. I felt like I couldn't have my own difficult moments, my own processes, my own needs, because her well-being depended completely on me. And paradoxically, that very total emotional dependence created a feeling of suffocation in me. I wanted space, time for myself, emotional freedom. That experience taught me why emotional independence is so attractive. Because when someone loves you without desperately needing you, they give you the space to be human, imperfect, with your own processes, without the pressure of always having to be another person's emotional pillar. And paradoxically, that very freedom awakens even more desire to be with that person, not less. Therefore, my dear reader, when you develop your emotional independence, you not only become more attractive, you also allow your partner to love you more freely and honestly. Now, I want to draw your attention to something I call the trap of constant availability. Many women think they are showing love by always being available, cancelling their plans, answering every message immediately, dropping everything for him. But total availability produces the exact opposite. It devalues your time and in turn devalues you. When something is always available, it loses its value. Men appreciate women who have their own priorities, their own schedule, their own life, not because they should be hard to get, but because it shows that they respect themselves. When you maintain your own commitments, your own activities, your own circle of friends, you show him, I am a valuable woman with a rich, fulfilling life. And that is far more attractive than always being available and waiting for him. It also makes the moments you share much more valuable. They become something special, something to look forward to. But if he knows you are always, immediately, and unconditionally there, that anticipation disappears. That's why it is so important to keep your own life, your own time, your own activities, not out of calculation, but out of self-respect and emotional health. And here's an important point. Saying no is not just healthy, it is necessary. If he invites you and you already have plans, don't cancel them right away. If he writes to you and you are busy, you don't have to respond immediately. If you need time for yourself, take it, without guilt. These small no's show that you have healthy boundaries, that you respect yourself, that you are not desperate for his attention. And paradoxically, these very boundaries create more respect and also more desire. Men respect women who respect themselves. It really is that simple. Now let me explain the difference between healthy vulnerability and emotional dependence. Many women confuse the two, and that is exactly why they confess things they shouldn't. Healthy vulnerability means sharing your fears, your dreams, your experiences, your deepest thoughts. Opening yourself emotionally from a position of inner strength because you know you can handle any reaction. Emotional dependence, on the other hand, means confessing to him that he is responsible for your happiness, that you cannot be okay without him, that you need his constant validation to feel valuable. Vulnerability creates real intimacy. Dependence creates pressure and suffocation. When you show healthy vulnerability, you are saying, I trust you with something important about me, because I trust you and I want you to know me more deeply. When you show dependence, you are saying, I need you in order to feel complete. Do you see the difference? One comes from emotional strength, the other from inner lack. Men feel honored when a strong woman shares her vulnerability with them, but they feel crushed when a woman places the responsibility for her well-being on them. That's why, before you share something very intimate, you should always ask yourself, am I doing this to create a genuine connection? Or am I doing this because I need his validation? If it's the latter, it's better to wait until you've strengthened your own inner security. And now, my dear reader, I want to tell you about the most powerful confession you can make, one that few women dare to make, telling him that you are happy even without him. Confessing that you are happy even without him is the strongest statement you can make, because it breaks all the patterns of emotional dependence that destroy relationships. A man who hears this immediately understands that you are not with him out of fear of loneliness, not because you need him as a crutch, but because you freely and from your abundance choose him. And this very freedom, this emotional autonomy, awakens deep respect and true desire. Because when a man knows that you are complete without him, he will do everything he can to remain a part of your life. And therefore, my dear reader, the next time you feel the temptation to confess your dependence, stop and remember, true love does not come from neediness, but from conscious choice. Work on yourself, strengthen your self-worth, build a rich and fulfilling life, and then love deeply without losing yourself in the process. That is the key to attracting and keeping a man of quality, and even more importantly, to living a healthy, free, and fulfilling love life.
Chosen one, how many times have you sat in silence and wondered, why, after all those prayers and efforts, are you still alone? This is not rejection. This is a sacred time. Being single is not a waiting room, but a rite of transformation on the journey of individuation, separating you from the masks that society has imposed, leading you back to the wholeness of the self. If relationships have flashed by and then vanished, it is not random. It is sacred protection so that your mission is not diluted. While the world rushes to pair up, you are invited to slow down, to learn to be fully present, to stand firm without needing a better half as a crutch. Because true love does not save us from emptiness. It only comes when we are already full. And when the moment arrives, the covenant will not just be emotion. It is a mission alliance where two mature souls ignite the same path together. In today's video, we will trace the traces of the collective unconscious, decode why doors that seem right slam shut, how your energy is preserved from wrong bindings, and what signs indicate that the one prepared for you is drawing near. If deep down you know this message is for you, stay until the end. Your encounter with yourself begins right now. Number 1. Singlehood as a stage of individuation. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But becoming oneself is not a gentle journey. It demands a separation. Singleness, therefore, is not a sad void or a failure, but an inevitable part of the journey of individuation, the process by which the soul delves into depth, removes the masks, passes through the shadows to unite with the wholeness of the self. From a psychological perspective, we grow up in molds prefabricated by family and society. How to study, where to work, when to marry, how many children to have, and how to live to be considered normal. Most people only need to step into that mold to feel satisfied. But for the chosen one, those molds are always cramped, suffocating. They sense a vague but persistent call. My path is not like others. And one of the clearest manifestations is prolonged singleness. No matter how hard they try, they cannot fit into the usual rhythms of love. Jung called this the moment when the soul is forced to withdraw energy from the crowd to turn inward. If you have ever wondered why you cannot form lasting bonds with relationships that seem full of promise, understand this. It is the unconscious refusing assimilation. You are not permitted to lose your essence to dissolve into a common mold. Instead, prolonged solitude is the space for you to confront the shadow, the dark parts, the wounds, the fragments we usually avoid. If you rush into a relationship to fill the emptiness, you will miss the opportunity to look straight at yourself. And until you have touched the shadow, you cannot truly enter love, because you are only loving with half the truth of yourself. Consider this reality. Some people only feel safe when they have status, a place in society. They cling to those labels to define their worth, but that also means they live dependent on the persona, the social mask that Jung warned against. The persona is the shell we build to fit in with others, to appear stable, right, and sufficient. But beneath that shell is an inner world that has never been decoded. For the chosen one, God, or we might say the deep unconscious, will not allow you to hide forever behind the persona. Thus, relationships that seem stable will collapse unexpectedly, as if an invisible hand extinguishes them before they can go far. That is a sacred intervention, forcing you to sit back with yourself. This is also what Jung called the stage of withdrawing projections. When we are immature, we often project our hero, healer, or perfect other half images onto others. We love not because we see who they are, but because we think they will fill our gaps. Singleness forces you to stop that game. With no one left to project onto, you are compelled to turn back and look at the holes within yourself. And only by looking straight do you learn to heal yourself, accept yourself, and become whole. This is the foundation of individuation. There are those who, after years of singleness, instead of fleeing the emptiness, begin to learn to embrace it. They embark on inner journeys, keeping dream journals, which Jung considered the key to entering the unconscious. They realize that nighttime dreams are not random products, but the language of the soul, sending messages. One person dreams of being abandoned in the vast sea, terrified by solitude. But upon analysis, they recognize it as an invitation to confront the fear of separation. Gradually, instead of fearing the sea, they learn to swim, and finally, the vast loneliness becomes strength. This is a vivid example of how singleness leads to individuation, refusing to flee, daring to plunge into the darkness to find freedom. Singleness also opens a rare possibility: deep dialogue with the collective unconscious itself. In the rush of life, most people seek to fill silence with noise, dates, social media, and fleeting relationships. But it is precisely in stillness that the unconscious speaks. That is when archetypes emerge. Some, in solitude, suddenly see the image of the wise old man in a dream, reminding them to learn patience. Others dream of the anima, or animus, the masculine archetype in the feminine in the masculine, reminding them that before loving another, they must integrate the male and female parts, reason and emotion, strength and softness within themselves. Otherwise, they will forever seek those pieces outside and remain lost. From Jung's view, singleness is no longer a state of emptiness, but an inner forge. In that forge, you learn to dismantle layer by layer of masks, to face the dark parts, to listen to the language of the unconscious, to integrate opposites within yourself. And only after that process do you step out as a whole person. Let me say it clearly. True love only happens between two whole people, not two deficient halves trying to patch each other up. Singleness is the time you go from broken half to wholeness. And when you are whole, love is no longer dependence, but companionship. No longer, I need you to survive, but I am me, you are you, and together we can create something greater. This is the vision of love that Jung called the union beyond opposites. Number 2, protection from unsuitable bonds. And precisely because true love blossoms between two whole beings, every immature connection must be halted. Singleness, therefore, is not just a forge, but also a shield of protection. Carl Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. When two souls meet, both change. But if this transformation veers from the path of growth, it can distort the soul itself. This is why you are protected, held in singleness longer than others, to prevent you from bonds that could shatter the process of individuation." In the world of psychology, love is not just a romantic emotion, it is a profound exchange of energy. When you enter a relationship, you do not just share joy or sorrow. You are giving each other parts of the unconscious. You link not just through bodies, but through the living archetypes within you. And if that archetype is immature, the relationship becomes a trap. Take this example. A man who has not reconciled with his anima, the feminine archetype in the masculine. He has not touched the softness, intuition, and nurturing ability within himself. Thus, when he loves, he projects the entire ideal woman image outward, placing it on the shoulders of the one he loves. But no one can carry those projections forever. Sooner or later, the relationship collapses because he is not truly loving her, but only the unintegrated part within himself. And if you are the chosen one, God will not allow you to get stuck in this kind of relationship, because it does not advance you toward the self, but pulls you away from it. The same holds for women. One who has not integrated her animus, the masculine archetype within her, will seek men as rescuing heroes. She does not see the strength, reason, and decisiveness within herself, so she needs a man to fill it. But this relationship, though sweet at first, soon becomes dependent. The man becomes a burden, and she loses the chance to recognize the power already within her. That is why, chosen one, the people you once thought would stay until the end disappear. It is not random, but the hand of the unconscious protecting you from dangerous dependence. In modern language, many psychologists call these bonds soul ties. Jung did not use that phrase, but the concept is clear in his theory. Whenever you connect deeply with someone, a part of your psyche merges with theirs. If they are unhealed, you take on extra burdens. If they live unconsciously, you get pulled into vortices they themselves do not understand. And a wrong bond can blind you, making you unable to hear the inner voice clearly, what Jung called disconnection from the self. Have you ever experienced this? Being with someone, you feel yourself weakening, your intuition fading, dreams becoming scarce, or prayers growing heavier. At first you think it is just temporary fatigue. But in truth, it is energy being drained. In chemistry, an unsuitable reaction can produce poison. In love, it is the same. A wrong bond can deplete the light within you without your awareness. For chosen ones, this is especially dangerous, because your energy is not just for yourself. It is energy for fulfilling your mission, for healing, creating, and inspiring. A wrong relationship does not just harm you, it derails the task your soul carried before birth. This is the deep reason you often experience sudden breakups, or for some strange reason, promising relationships never form. It is an invisible protective wall, a form of divine intervention, keeping you intact until the right person, the right time appears. In some cases, this protection takes the form of invisibility. Have you noticed that sometimes others rarely romantically notice you, even though you have clear appeal? That is because your unconscious sends rejection signals. Jung once explained that unconscious energy can influence how others perceive you, even without words being spoken. You do not appear to those who are unsuitable, as if the universe is shielding you. This may confuse you, but in truth, it is a grace. You are sheltered from hands that could damage your soul's progress. The modern world often praises love as much as possible, experience as much as you can. But in Jung's light, that is a trap. Every deep relationship is an etching into the soul. Not every etching is healthy. Some become wounds that last forever, even for generations. Chosen one, you are spared those experiences, not because you are less attractive, but because you are protected. You are not permitted to become a vessel for chaos. And when you understand this, you will stop seeing romantic failures as humiliation and begin to see them as liberation. Perhaps you yourself have gone through relationships that seemed full of promise, but shattered inexplicably. Share that experience in the comments, because sometimes, when we dare to name what was once hidden, we not only free ourselves, but also help others illuminate their own journeys. Jung once said, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown." We do not solve the problem, we grow beyond it. You're no longer being drawn into wrong relationships is a sign that you are growing. You have outgrown the old lessons. You no longer need falls to recognize yourself. And it is precisely in this protection that you are being prepared for a higher bond. A relationship that does not make you lose yourself, but helps you expand it. Number 3. The collective unconscious and decoding family cycles. If in the previous section, we said that you are held in singleness to avoid wrong connections that could erode the soul, then at a deeper level, there is another reason why you must walk alone for so long. You're not only protecting yourself, but also confronting memories that are not your own. This is where Carl Jung leads us to the concept of the collective unconscious, the realm where the experiences, memories, and patterns of all humanity and your entire lineage have been etched across generations. The collective unconscious operates like an underground river. We are born, imagining ourselves as independent individuals, but in truth, we are swimming in an ancient current that has flowed from ancestors, grandparents, to parents, and now to you. Every belief, fear, way of loving, way of living that you witness in the family does not come solely from behavior, but from psychological patterns rooted across generations. Chosen one, your prolonged singleness is the opportunity to separate yourself from that flow, to clearly see the cycles binding the family, and to become the one who breaks them. Try to recall. Some families seem to endlessly repeat a tragedy. From one generation to the next, men leave, women swallow pain in silence. Or another family, where with each new generation, marriages shatter. Some families seem cursed by fate. A mother endures a cheating husband, and her daughter unconsciously chooses an unfaithful man. Why do these scripts repeat? Jung believed that when a problem in the collective unconscious has not been recognized and healed, it will continue to surface, hidden as fate. And you, chosen one, are placed in singleness to gain enough distance to recognize those patterns. For example, you might notice yourself repeatedly attracted to certain types of people, emotionally distant ones, those unwilling to commit, or those carrying wounds you unconsciously want to heal. This is not just personal taste, but an echo from the family unconscious. If in your family, generations of women have loved cold, irresponsible men, the collective unconscious may compel you to repeat it. You are held in singleness, not to be punished, but to recognize that vortex and end it. Jung once emphasized that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The fated romantic troubles you see in the family are not random. They are the unnamed unconscious. And being kept from superficial relationships is to give you time to realize you were not born to repeat history. You were born to end it. From a therapeutic perspective, many modern psychoanalysts, inheriting Jung's ideas, call this intergenerational trauma. Unhealed wounds from one generation will find ways to manifest in the next. But Jung viewed it through a more sacred lens. It is no coincidence that you were born into that family. Your soul chose that family to carry the healing ability, to do the work that those before could not finish. And because that task is heavy, you need singleness as an isolation zone to have enough space to process memories that do not belong to you. And if you enter marriage too soon, they will flood into your children's lives. You may see this in your own life. Every time you try to connect, an invisible force stops everything. You feel sad, abandoned. But look closer. Is it not precisely in those periods of singleness that you begin reading healing books, seeking therapy, or simply mustering the courage to ask, why does my family keep repeating this? When you ask that question, you have already broken the silence that many generations before dared not touch. Singleness, therefore, is no longer loneliness, but an invitation to participate in a greater work, the work of liberating an entire lineage. You may never have thought that your singleness relates to your parents or grandparents, but in reality, it is intimately connected. You are separated not to suffer, but to observe, to see the overlooked pieces, to hear the silent cries of previous generations, and to bring it all into the light. That is the work Jung called making the unconscious conscious, turning the unconscious into consciousness. When you name it, the loop ends. And this is the key point. If you do not recognize and break it, you will unconsciously pass those burdens to the next generation, your children. Thus, your singleness is not just a personal journey, but a sacred responsibility. It ensures that when you enter love, you enter with freedom, not the weight of the past. That love will no longer carry the wounds of ancestors, but the healing for the future. Number 4. You are in a transformation phase, alchemy of the soul. Precisely when you stand apart from old patterns, your soul enters a spiritual alchemy process, a transformation. Carl Jung was once obsessed with alchemy, not because he believed in turning metal into gold, but because he saw in it a perfect metaphor for psychological transformation. And you, chosen one, right now are living in the laboratory of your own soul. In alchemy, the first stage is called nigredo, the dark phase. This is when everything disintegrates, chaos reigns, like the death of the old. The alchemist must endure heating, crushing, and burning to turn raw material into a pure substance. Likewise, the singleness you are experiencing sometimes carries the feeling of nigredo. Relationships shatter, illusions are smashed, dreams of perfect love fall into the abyss. You feel the world around you darkening, emptying, disoriented. But Jung would remind you, it is precisely in the darkness that the seed of light is sown. Without nigredo, there would never be the turning to gold. Consider an everyday example. There are people who, after a breakup, instead of rushing to find someone new, choose to travel alone or simply spend months in a small room, writing, drawing, or meditating. On the surface, someone might say, they are wasting time, they are alone too long. But inside, something else is happening. They are being melted down, refined. Fears of abandonment, old beliefs about love and about self-worth are being heated until they cease to exist. And as the ashes fall, a new self is forming. That is inner alchemy. At a deeper level, Jung called this the individuation process. You cannot become the whole self just by reading books or listening to lectures. You must go through the fire. And singleness is that fire. It burns away dependence, burns away social masks, burns away even borrowed dreams from others. When all the shells are burned, only the original core remains. And that core is the true gold. Recall the butterfly's metamorphosis. When entering the cocoon, it does not simply grow wings. It must self-dissolve its own body, turning into a complete cellular soup, and only then restructure into a butterfly. This stage looks from the outside like a still cocoon, but inside is fierce destruction and recreation. Your singleness is like that cocoon. Outsiders may think you are waiting for love. No one has come to you yet. But the truth is, within you, a complete transformation is underway. And like the butterfly, once you emerge from the cocoon, you will never return to being a caterpillar. It is worth noting, Chosen One, that this transformation process is not comfortable. Jung once emphasized that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Prolonged singleness may force you to face loneliness, emptiness, and the feeling of belonging nowhere. But those experiences are the acid solution in the alchemical laboratory, dissolving the old ego. If you dare to stay, dare to endure, you will move to the next stage. Rebirth. I once knew a woman who, after years of trying to start a family without success, finally accepted sitting still. In those years, she learned to paint, to play music, went to psychological therapy, delved deep into her dreams and unconscious. After 5 years, she said a powerful sentence, "I have learned to be friends with my own silence. I no longer need anyone to prove my worth." Just 1 year later, she met her life partner, but this time, she entered the relationship from wholeness, no longer from lack. This is living proof that when you complete the alchemical journey, love comes as a reward, not as a means to escape. Perhaps this is also the time for you to allow yourself to breathe slowly. No need to rush for answers, just observe yourself. In the sometimes seemingly meaningless stillness of your life is a transformation quietly taking place. Those days that seem empty may not be futile at all, but the forge melting the old ego to make way for a new being. Give your mind a chance to feel that. Jung also linked alchemy to the union of opposites. In inner transformation, you learn to reconcile the opposing sides within yourself, strength and weakness, light and shadow, reason and emotion. Before, you needed others to compensate for the missing part, but through alchemy, you learn to carry both poles within. When that happens, you become psychologically autonomous, and only then does love cease to be dependence, but companionship. You may still wonder, how do I know I have completed the alchemical process? How do I recognize that the transformation is finished? Jung would answer, you know when you no longer fear the darkness, when you can sit alone in silence without feeling empty, when you look back at old relationships and instead of resentment, you smile in gratitude, when you no longer seek love to fill, but to share. When that happens, you have emerged from the cocoon. You have become the butterfly. Number 5. Establishing boundaries and inner maturity. When a transformation process has taken place, as we discussed in spiritual alchemy, you are no longer the old self. But the transformation does not sustain itself. It needs to be reinforced, shaped, and protected by boundaries. If alchemy is the fire that turns you into gold, then establishing boundaries is the vessel that protects the gold from erosion. This is the essential step, so that your inner maturity is not just a flash of insight, but a sustainable state. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because when you truly accept yourself, you will no longer allow anyone to trespass into what does not belong to them." Boundaries are the clearest sign of self-acceptance. When you know who you are, you also know what is not you, and you dare to say no. In everyday life, a lack of boundaries causes many people to fall into draining cycles. You have seen those who seem to always be emotional dumping grounds for others. Whenever someone is sad, they immediately take it on. Whenever someone is angry, they absorb it. They become sponges, soaking up everything, and dissolve themselves. That is a classic example of having no boundaries. And chosen one, you were once that person. You gave unconditionally, you opened your heart too soon, and you let your energy be drained dry. Prolonged singleness is to teach you the most important lesson, how to build fences without turning yourself into a fortress. Jung called this process the integration of the shadow. Boundaries are not rigid, but the recognition that within you are vulnerable parts, easily manipulated. When you deny the shadow, you also deny the ability to protect yourself. But when you look straight at the shadow, you understand your weaknesses, and from there, you set boundaries so no one exploits those gaps. For example, a woman who once always nodded to every request from friends. She believed that refusing was selfish, but as a result, she was emotionally abused, her time exploited, and ultimately exhausted. When she entered the journey of singleness and therapy, she learned that refusing is not selfish, but self-love. She began saying no to invitations her heart did not want, and began prioritizing time for creativity and rest. And something miraculous happened. Instead of losing friends, she attracted those who respected those boundaries. This is inner maturity, where she no longer had to prove worth through sacrifice, but knew that worth already exists. Jung also pointed out that inner maturity is not the elimination of emotions, but learning to navigate them. When immature, we are easily reactive, angry, fearful, jealous, and let emotions control us. But in singleness, you have the opportunity to observe your emotions purely, unclouded by romantic scripts. You learn to see anger as a crying child, loneliness as a call from the unconscious, and instead of resisting, you listen. This listening helps you gradually become self-mastered. Inner maturity is when you no longer need the outside world to define how you should feel. Another equally important aspect is learning to distinguish love from assimilation. Boundaries help you recognize true love does not require you to lose yourself. If a relationship forces you to sacrifice your essence, to trim dreams to fit another's mold, that is not love, that is assimilation. And chosen one, you have been tested in such situations. But each time, the relationship collapsed to teach you. Love is not dissolution. Love is companionship. Some will ask, how do I know I have truly achieved inner maturity? The answer does not lie in you no longer feeling pain, anger, or fear, but in the fact that when those emotions arise, you do not let them pull you into chaos. You observe, you recognize, and you respond from calm. Inner maturity is not the absence of storms, but learning to balance amid the storm. Number 6, the sacred timing and the coming union. And when you reach that state, a new door in the journey will open. Because inner maturity is not just a reward for yourself, but a signal sent to the universe that you are ready. When the inside is solid, the outside will begin to shift. This is precisely when things that seem random become meaningful arrangements, signaling that the sacred timing is gradually revealing itself. Something wondrous begins to happen. The universe starts aligning. Things that seem random begin to take on the shape of meaningful coincidence, or as Jung called it, synchronicity. That is when signs, encounters, and doors opening simultaneously make you realize the sacred timing is drawing near. Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." A true meeting is never random, but the intersection of two soul currents prepared from before. This is exactly what you are being led to. The union not just of two people, but of two individuation journeys that have reached the maturity stage. Try to imagine. You have spent a long stretch going through the darkness, learning to stand firm on your own, breaking family cycles, and being reborn from alchemical fire. Meanwhile, somewhere in the world, another person is undergoing a similar journey. Perhaps they too are single, also wondering why they are delayed, learning to set boundaries and face their own shadow. You and they both are separate rivers, flowing, winding through the bends of fate. And then, when the time comes, those two rivers will converge. That is the sacred moment of union. In real life, you may see this through unexpected encounters. An old friend returns, a chance connection through work, or a moment when your eyes meet someone's and something resonates within you. We have been waiting for each other. That is not imagination. That is resonance at the unconscious level. When two souls have gone through enough preparation, the unconscious recognizes each other before consciousness can name it. It is important to understand that this union does not come a second earlier or a beat later. If it comes too soon, when you are not yet mature, the relationship becomes a burden. If too late, when you have hardened, you will close your heart. Thus, it comes at the right time, the moment when both are full enough not to seek compensation, but companionship. This is what makes sacred love different from ordinary love. It does not arise from lack, but from wholeness. A beautiful metaphor for this is astronomy. As planets move, there are rare moments when they align straight, creating the conjunction phenomenon. Astrologers call this a time of powerful energy, opening doors to great transformation. Your sacred love is the same. It is like the rare conjunction of two planets, at the right time, right position, right orbit. Not early, not late. And when it happens, you will know immediately, not by reason, but by the deep peace in your heart. Jung had a concept called conjunctio, the union. In alchemy, this is the stage where gold is formed as opposites, sun and moon, male and female, light and shadow, finally blend. In Jungian psychology, conjunctio is not just inner union, but its reflection outward in sacred relationships. That is when you meet someone who resonates not just emotionally, but missionally. They are not just a life partner, they are a companion on the spiritual journey. Let me illustrate with a real story. There was a man who, after many years single, during that time, devoted himself to writing a book about his journey through personal shadow. He did not expect that very book would lead him to a woman who was seeking answers for similar pain. They met not on a date, but at a book launch. And right in conversation both realized they had taken different paths to the same point. That was not mere romance, but the union of two journeys. Chosen one, this is the love you are being prepared for. Not love that comes to rescue you from loneliness, but love that comes to join you in fulfilling a greater mission. Because, as Jung once emphasized, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. When you meet the right person, the reaction does not just create joy, but a new energy capable of spreading, influencing, and transforming the world around you. Remember, the previous relationships that did not last were not because you were not good enough, but because you were being preserved for this encounter. The times you cried over closed doors were the times the universe adjusted the orbit, ensuring that when the conjunction happens, you will be ready. And when it comes, you will realize all the loneliness, all the waiting, all the inner practice were not in vain. When piecing together the fragments of the story, we see a red thread running throughout. You are not abandoned, you are preserved to grow into your true form. The silence that once made you anxious turns out to be the breath that helps the soul regain its rhythm. The closed doors do not erase your worth. They only redirect so you do not stray from your essence's orbit. From here, the question, when, no longer haunts as before, because something more important has formed. A solid inner self, knowing who you are and what is worthy to walk alongside. If this message touches you, leave a sign so I know you are still journeying along. A like or a subscribe not only helps the channel continue spreading Jung's wisdom, but is also your way of affirming to yourself, I am ready to step deeper into the inner journey. Hit the bell to not miss any reminders from the universe, and share this video with those also seeking answers. Who knows, it may be the invisible gift they need right now.
Have you ever asked yourself, why do I care so deeply about everyone else, but when it comes to me, it feels like nobody notices, nobody checks in, nobody truly cares? If you're an empath, that question is probably the soundtrack of your life. And here's the truth. It's not because you're unworthy. It's not because people are heartless. It's because somewhere along the way, you were trained to believe that your safety and your value depended on taking care of everyone else. Carl Jung noticed this pattern again and again in his patients. He worked with people who spent their entire lives being the psychological caretaker in their families. These were the children who grew up in unstable, toxic households, where the parents were unpredictable, fighting, depressed, or emotionally absent. Instead of being allowed to play, dream, or explore, these children were recruited, without consent, into roles like the peacekeeper, the mediator, the emotional sponge. Jung saw that they had learned to read every subtle shift in the room: a sigh, a slammed door, a silence that carried tension. They knew before anyone said a word if a storm was coming. And the tragic part is that in order to survive, they had to set aside their own needs. They learned that expressing anger, sadness, or even joy could make things worse. So they buried those emotions deep inside and put on a mask of calm, helpfulness, and maturity. That child became the adult empath, someone who knows everyone else's mood better than their own. But Jung warned, whatever we push into the unconscious doesn't disappear. It lives there, in the shadow. And the shadow of the empath is this deep, aching belief: if I don't take care of you, I will be abandoned. I will not be loved. This is why empaths care too much. It's not a personality quirk. It's a survival strategy that once saved them as children. But as adults, it often creates the exact opposite of what they long for. When you give and give, people get comfortable taking. And when you hide your needs, others stop seeing them altogether. Jung worked with patients who had breakdowns because of this imbalance. He described people who lived in constant service to others, but secretly, beneath their kind exterior, they felt unseen, resentful, even invisible. He helped them realize that their compulsive caring wasn't pure altruism. It was also fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being irrelevant, fear of what would happen if they said no. And what's really interesting is that many of these empaths, because of this programming, felt magnetically drawn to therapy, nursing, healing, or spiritual guidance. It made sense. They had decades of experience in saving others. But Jung noticed that sometimes their entire identity got fused with this role. They became the helper, not because their soul truly wanted it, but because their trauma demanded it. And that's why, later in life, many awakened empaths suddenly quit the therapy or healing path altogether. They realize, I don't actually want to spend my life rescuing people. I want to live. I want to create. I want to discover who I am when I'm not holding up everyone else's world. In this video, I'm going to reveal not only why this happens, but also how you can break the cycle, so you're not doomed to care for everyone except yourself. By the end, you'll understand the psychology, the shadow work, and the spiritual tools to start receiving the same love and care you've been giving away your whole life. In the meantime, if it hits home, drop a comment below. Maybe share an affirmation like, "My needs matter too." That way, we create a community where empaths don't feel so alone. Because here's the paradox Jung pointed out. The very thing that made you survive as a child, the ability to attune to everyone else, becomes the very thing that makes you invisible as an adult. And unless you face that shadow, you'll keep repeating the cycle. Think about how this plays out in adult life. Empaths often find themselves in one-sided relationships where they pour oceans of love, time, and energy into another person, yet receive just drops back. It's not that others are always malicious, it's that the empath has been unconsciously trained to tolerate imbalance. When you're used to putting your own needs last, neglect feels familiar. Jung observed that the unconscious drives us toward what is unhealed. So the empath who grew up in a home where love was conditional will often choose partners, friends, or bosses who replay that same script. I will give everything to you, and in return, I hope you'll finally notice me. But notice what happens. The empath becomes exhausted, resentful, and sometimes bitter. And still, their needs remain unseen. This is where shadow work becomes crucial. The shadow isn't just the dark side, it's everything you had to hide to survive. For the empath, that hidden part is often their own anger, their longing to be cared for, their desire to rest, their need to be selfish sometimes. Jung saw that healing begins when those exiled parts are welcomed back. Until then, the empath is stuck being the caretaker for everyone else, while their own inner child is starving for love. Many empaths also find themselves in jobs where they are undervalued. They're the co-workers who keep the team emotionally stable, the ones who listen, soothe, and prevent conflicts. Yet rarely do they get the promotions or recognition because their role is invisible. It's about holding the space for others. And so the cycle continues. Caring for everyone, receiving little in return. Now you might ask, why don't people notice empaths? Because when you never voice your needs, when you smile while you're breaking inside, when you keep saying, "I'm fine," even when you're not, others believe you. People respond to what you show, not what you hide. And the empath, by training, hides everything. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies on codependency and attachment show that children who had to care for unstable parents often develop what's called fawning. Instead of fight or flight, they survive through pleasing. As adults, they struggle to set boundaries because deep down they fear that if they stop giving, they'll be abandoned. And here's the hidden twist. Sometimes the empath's constant giving actually pushes people away. When you take responsibility for everyone's emotions, you unconsciously send the message, "I don't trust you to handle your own life." And that can feel suffocating to others. This is why, ironically, the empath can feel rejected even though they've given everything. Jung had a patient who embodied this. She was a woman who had devoted her life to her family, suppressing her own ambitions. Outwardly, she was loved and respected. Inwardly, she felt invisible, drained, and deeply unfulfilled. Jung helped her see that her compulsive caregiving wasn't pure love. It was a mask hiding her fear of rejection. When she began to reclaim her shadow, the parts of her that wanted independence, expression, and even conflict, her relationships shifted. She was no longer just the caretaker. She became a whole person. This brings us to a hard but liberating truth. Empathy without boundaries is self-abandonment. You cannot pour endlessly into others without drying up inside. True compassion must include yourself, or else it's not compassion. It's compulsion. So if you've ever wondered why no one seems to care for you the way you care for them, it's not because you're unlovable. It's because you've been conditioned to erase your needs. And until you reclaim them, others can't see them either. This is where the awakening begins for many empaths. At some point, the exhaustion, the resentment, and the quiet ache inside becomes too heavy to ignore. They start asking, what about me? What do I actually want? Who am I when I'm not saving everyone else? Carl Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming your true self, rather than the role your childhood forced on you. Individuation requires a confrontation with the shadow. And for empaths, that shadow often contains the parts of themselves they've labeled as selfish, angry, or too much. Jung would say, those rejected parts are not your enemy. They're the missing pieces of your wholeness. This is why many empaths, after becoming self-aware, walk away from the very roles they once thought were their destiny. You'll see it often. A therapist who suddenly decides to paint, a nurse who leaves to become a writer, a healer who opens a bakery. To outsiders, it looks like they're abandoning their gift. But in reality, they're liberating themselves from a program that said their worth only comes from helping others. Here's the shadow side. If your identity is built solely on being the caretaker, you can never stop. You'll feel guilty resting, guilty saying no, guilty choosing yourself. But guilt is not your intuition. It's the echo of conditioning. And if you listen too closely, it will keep you enslaved. Let's be clear. Empaths can be extraordinary healers. Their sensitivity, intuition, and compassion are real gifts. But Jung would remind us that gifts become curses when they dominate the personality. You are more than your empathy. You are a full human being with desires, creativity, boundaries, and even darkness. To only live as the helper is to live half a life. So what do you do if you recognize yourself in this? Step 1. Acknowledge the shadow. Admit to yourself that sometimes you help because you're afraid of being rejected if you don't. That doesn't make you bad. It makes you human. By bringing this motive into awareness, you begin to loosen its grip. Step 2. Experiment with small boundaries. Start by saying no in places that feel safe. Notice how the world doesn't collapse when you protect your energy. In fact, often people respect you more when you stop overgiving. Step 3. Practice receiving. This one is hard for empaths, but powerful. When someone offers help, don't deflect. Don't say, "I'm fine." Practice saying yes. Receiving is a muscle, and the more you use it, the more natural it becomes. Step 4. Reconnect with joy. Jung noticed that when his patients began integrating their shadow, they didn't just feel more balanced, they rediscovered play, creativity, and a sense of freedom. So ask yourself, what lights me up that has nothing to do with fixing anyone? Dance, write, garden, or travel. Whatever makes your soul feel alive. Step 5. Seek relationships where reciprocity exists. If you're always the giver, you'll feel drained. If you're always the taker, you'll feel guilty. But when care flows both ways, it heals the nervous system. It shows the empath child inside of you that love doesn't have to be earned by sacrificing yourself. One of Jung's patients, a man who spent years caring for a domineering parent, eventually realized his deepest wound wasn't that others didn't care for him. It was that he never allowed them to. His mask of strength, his refusal to show vulnerability, made him untouchable. When he finally admitted, "I need care too," his relationships transformed. For the first time, he let people in. And that's the heart of this whole journey. Empaths don't actually need to stop caring. They need to start including themselves in the circle of their own compassion. Because if your heart can hold the suffering of others, surely it can hold your own. So let me ask you, what's one thing you've denied yourself because you were too busy caring for others? Share it in the comments. Your answer might help someone else feel less alone. Or, if that feels too vulnerable, write an affirmation like, "I deserve the same care I give." Put it out into the world and let it anchor into your mind. Because the truth is, when an empath begins to care for themselves, they don't lose their gift. They refine it. Their empathy becomes cleaner, stronger, and freer. They stop rescuing people out of fear and start connecting from love. So if you've carried the weight of everyone else's emotions your whole life, know this: you don't have to keep carrying it. Your soul is not here to be everyone's parent, healer, or savior. Your soul is here to be whole, and wholeness includes you.
There are women who awaken, and there are women who merely brush past. The difference isn't in their hands, but in their intention. Because a deep man doesn't ignite with empty gestures. He burns when someone dares to discover the places no one else has. Do you want to know why they ignore you? Why they don't desire you like before? It's not your age, it's not your appearance. It's that you don't know how to awaken what truly matters. And as long as you think desire is born only in bed, you'll keep spinning in frustration, invisible. Today I'll reveal 5 places a man longs to be touched, though he'll never admit it. Places that activate his mind, his body, and his soul. The last one is the most transformative of all, but also the most challenging if you don't know how to channel it. This is a revelation for those who are tired of being invisible. Stay until the end. You'll understand truths no one has ever revealed to you, and that he'll never confess. Have you ever touched a man and nothing happened? No spark? No different look? Not even a subtle change in his breathing, just that uncomfortable silence that makes it clear what you didn't resonate. I'll tell you why. Because you touched where everyone else touches, but he doesn't need it. That's the problem. You're trying to crack a safe with the same combination you used 30 years ago, and none of that works anymore. Let's go to the first point, the lower back. It's where his armor begins to fade. It's no coincidence that right there, precisely there, the weight of the years accumulates. Not just physical fatigue, but emotional exhaustion too. A man who has lived, who has supported a family, who has faced disappointments and made decisions that drained him. He doesn't need hands that touch him without purpose. He needs to be touched with a presence that says, I'm here and I see you. Picture this. He's in front of you, fixing something at home, answering emails, immersed in the same routine that always surrounds him. You approach without saying a word and place your hand on the curve of his lower back. Not abruptly, not with obvious desire, but with firmness and respect. A gesture that doesn't seek sex, but presence. And in that moment, if done right, something shifts. Not because you're arousing him, but because you're speaking to his collective unconscious. As Jung would say, you're reminding him that someone still sees him as a man, that someone notices what everyone else overlooks. But don't get confused. This isn't magic. It's not about touching just to touch. It's about being there, letting your energy transmit what your words no longer can. The lower back is a zone that cries out without a voice, and only the women who've stopped seeking validation can hear that call. Want proof? Think of the last time a man shivered just from a touch on his waist. It's probably been so long you don't even associate it with anything tangible, because you've lived believing that intense gestures, bold words, or bedroom games are what keep desire alive. But no, it's the detail, the pause, the touch that says, I didn't come to use you, I came to behold you. Touch him there with intention, not expecting anything in return. Do it knowing that this small gesture could be the beginning of a new kind of connection, a way to rebuild something that once seemed lost. And if you do it right, if you do it without rush, you'll see it's not the skin you're touching. It's his shadow, as Jung would call it. His story, his struggle, his need to be seen by someone who doesn't treat him as a provider, a father, a friend, but as a whole man. This is how desire begins to awaken, not from the flesh, but from the soul. And that, my friend, is something few understand and almost no one dares to teach. Second point, the touch that revives what's been forgotten. If you understood what I said earlier, then you already know that desire doesn't ignite from the surface. It ignites when you touch with purpose, when you make a man feel that there's still fire beneath the ashes, and that fire isn't stoked by the obvious, but by the forgotten. We've arrived at the second key point, the inner part of the arm, the touch that revives what has been forgotten. Because there, where few look, lies one of the most powerful zones for creating emotional and physical connection. But since it's not visible, not named, most people ignore it. And that ignorance is costing you his desire. The inner part of the arm is an area that, according to neuropsychology, is full of highly sensitive nerve endings. But that's secondary. What truly matters is that this point is deeply tied to emotional memory. Yes, the memory of affection, the one that holds the first tender touches, caring gestures, sincere caresses from someone who wasn't seeking anything but presence. When you touch that area with gentleness and firmness, you're not seducing him like an anxious teenager. You're activating buried archetypes. As Jung would say, you're telling him without words, I can touch you without expecting anything in return, simply because you deserve to be touched. Now think about this. How many times do you think a mature man has been caressed without expectations? How many times has someone placed a hand on him just to remind him that he's still alive, still worthy of unconditional affection? Very few, because with age, touch becomes mechanical, or disappears. The women around him stop touching him with curiosity. They see him as a father, a friend, a support figure, but not as a man. And that destroys more than time ever could. That withers the root of desire. From Stoicism comes a powerful idea. You can't control how others perceive you, but you can control the value you give to small acts. Touching the inner arm is a subtle act, but one full of intention. It's a decision to be present, and that decision, when done right, has the power to restore what seemed lost. A man who receives that touch doesn't think she's seducing me. He thinks, she's reminding me that I'm valuable, that I still have something to offer, that there's still beauty in me. That kind of touch doesn't demand, doesn't pressure. It simply exists, but its impact is deep, because it activates an ancestral need to feel valued. It tells him, without words, that someone sees him, without judging his age, his scars, or his battles. And when a man feels that, he transforms. He stops putting up walls. He lets his guard down. He starts looking at you differently, not because you're promising anything, but because you're giving back something he thought he'd lost. His right to be desired. The great mistake is believing that desire is triggered by lingerie, by promises, or by beautiful words. No. Desire awakens when you touch where others don't dare to, when you dare to be different. When you understand that the body is not just skin, it's a story, and that every gesture, every touch, can be the key that opens a forgotten door. So the next time you're with him, don't look for the shortcut. Place your hand on that inner part of his arm. Don't say anything, just stay there, present, feeling. And if you do it right, you'll notice it. Not in his immediate reaction, but in his breathing, in the way he starts looking at you differently, in that subtle tremor that reveals something inside him has awakened. And that's where the real thing begins. Not sex, not conquest, but real connection. The kind that lasts, the kind that transforms, the kind that very few women ever manage to create. Third point, where vulnerability becomes surrender. You already know that touching is not the same as connecting, and a poorly executed caress without intention is worse than doing nothing at all. We've already talked about the lower back and the inner arm, but now we come to a point many ignore because they don't dare to explore what they don't understand. We've arrived at the third point, and this is where things start to change. The edge of the jaw, where vulnerability becomes surrender. This spot isn't just sensitive physically, it's sensitive because it symbolizes both power and fragility. It's an exposed area, close to the eyes, the neck, the mouth. Touching there is like saying, I'm so close I could hurt you, but I choose to protect you. And do you know what that does to a mature man? It gives him back the ability to trust. It reminds him that he can let his guard down without being invaded. Because the edge of the jaw is not caressed as if you're trying to speed things up. It's caressed like someone who has all the time in the world, like someone who doesn't need to rush. because she already understands that true desire lives not in urgency, but in stillness. Here's a practical strategy that can completely change the way you relate to a man who's lived. The next time you're having a calm conversation with him, don't interrupt with romantic words or hints. Just lean in slowly and rest your finger lightly on the edge of his jaw. Look into his eyes, don't smile. Just look, hold that gesture for a few seconds, then slowly remove your hand, say nothing. Return to the conversation as if nothing happened. Did you feel that? That is power. Not because you're manipulating, but because you're present. Because that gesture communicates something no compliment ever could, that you hold power, but you don't use it to dominate, you use it to protect. It tells him you don't need to prove anything. You're just there, and if he wants to stay, he can. This kind of touch breaks a pattern. Because most women are waiting for the right moment, the perfect timing to kiss, to caress, to say something that works. But the women who truly awaken desire don't wait for moments. They create them. And this touch on the jaw is not a technique, it's a silent declaration. You're telling him he can surrender without fear, because you're not there to take advantage of him. You're there to perceive him as a whole, with his wounds and his strengths. Fourth point, the place he never expected you to notice. If you've made it this far, you already understand that touching the body without touching the soul is like lighting a candle in a room full of dust. It barely lights up, and it dies out. Genuine connection isn't built with generic phrases or memorized techniques. It's built through presence, intention, and deep understanding. But there's a silent, almost invisible mistake that can destroy all progress, even when you think you're doing everything right. Let's talk about the fourth point, behind the knees, the place he never expected you to notice. This area, forgotten by nearly everyone, is a perfect metaphor for what happens when we ignore what isn't visible. Behind the knees lies a sensitivity that doesn't respond to logic or immediate desire. It represents what's been left behind, what's not shown, what's deemed unimportant. And here's the mistake: thinking that only what's visible matters, that only what he shows you needs to be touched. Many women get caught up in the obvious. They want to change their lives from the surface, improving their looks, speaking differently, pretending to be confident. But they leave the deeper layers untouched, just like that part behind the knees, sensitive, overlooked, and vulnerable. The mental trap is this: believing that if something isn't mentioned, it doesn't exist, that if a man doesn't ask to be touched there, it means nothing, that if you don't understand the value of something, then it must not be valuable. And so you go on avoiding the uncomfortable, the things you don't know how to handle. This is why many women fail in relationships. They try to change the outside while staying the same inside, and the man senses it, not through words, but through his body, through his silence, through that distance you can't seem to cross. When you touch behind his knees, you're sending a message no other woman has dared to express, that you care even about what he himself has forgotten, that you're not just there for what's easy, what's shiny, or what gives instant gratification. You're there for what truly matters. And in the mind of a mature man, that's revolutionary, because most have already given up. They've stopped expecting that kind of attention. They've grown used to being invisible in the deepest parts of their body and soul. Jung would call it the encounter with the shadow, that rejected part we all carry inside. The consequences of ignoring this are devastating. You don't just lose his desire, you lose his respect, because he knows when you're improvising. He knows when your gestures come from a script, not from intention, and that's when you become just another woman. Another one who didn't know how to touch where it hurts, where it vibrates, where life still lingers. Touching behind the knees isn't an erotic act. It's proof that you're willing to explore what others don't see. And if you do it right, if you reach that place with the same natural grace you'd use to touch his face, then something deep begins to shift, not just in him, in you. Because when you train yourself to see what no one else sees, to value what others overlook, you begin to see your own life differently too. You begin to notice everything you've ignored in yourself. your fears, your repressed emotions, your desire to be touched with respect, with curiosity, with presence. So don't be fooled. What may seem like a simple spot on the body is actually a portal to the soul. And that portal only opens to those unafraid to face the invisible, to those who aren't seeking quick results, but deep transformation. Fifth and final point, the connection that transcends the body. We've reached the final point in this journey. And if you've truly listened to everything so far, you already know. This isn't about seduction techniques. It's about reconnecting with something many have already given up on, self-respect. This fifth point isn't just a place on the body. It's a symbol of everything you've been ignoring, the scalp, the connection that transcends the body. And if you don't understand what it represents, you'll stay trapped on the surface, believing that desire is physical, when in truth it's mental, emotional, spiritual. Jung would call it the point of contact with the animus, the masculine energy every woman carries within. Touching a man's scalp isn't the same as running your fingers through his hair. It's touching the root of his inner world, the place where thoughts, tension, and doubt accumulate. It's silently telling him, I don't just desire your body, I desire your mind, and I'm willing to hold it with care. But not everyone can do this, because done poorly, it feels invasive, awkward, uncomfortable. Done right, though, it requires complete presence. It requires being the kind of woman who's not afraid of silence, because her fingers do the speaking. And here lies the problem. Most women can't stand silence. They crave instant results. They want him to react, to give them a sign, some kind of validation. And when they don't get it, they grow frustrated, pull away. Or worse, victimize themselves. They say, I did everything right and he didn't even look at me. They don't understand that desire isn't awakened through pressure, but through patience. That touching the scalp isn't meant to arouse, but to connect, to make him feel that someone finally can hold him without asking for anything in return. But if you keep looking for shortcuts, you'll end up like so many others, frustrated, confused, not understanding why he keeps shutting down. The reason is simple. It's not that he can't feel anymore, it's that he doesn't trust anymore. And with your impatience, with your need to get something back, you confirm what he already fears, that opening up isn't worth it. That no woman truly understands the value of deep connection. The scalp, when touched with intention, triggers the release of oxytocin, the hormone of trust. And if you can make him feel that with you, without sex, without manipulation, then you're touching what truly matters. But it's not easy. It requires a different mindset. You have to stop acting like an emotional beggar, waiting for him to validate your existence. You have to start moving like a woman who is already whole. Because only from that fullness can you touch without needing, without anxiety, without urgency. That's the difference between women who awaken desire and those who only awaken pity. Changing this pattern doesn't start with changing your gestures. It begins by changing your intention. By understanding that if you're not ready to touch with your soul, it's better not to touch at all. Because men sense it, not through their skin, but through energy. And if you're empty inside, he'll feel it. So transform, but do it for real. Not with promises, not with pretty words, with presence, patience, and respect. And if you don't know where to begin, start with this. The next time you're with him, stay silent. Get close. Place your hand gently on his head. Stay there. Breathe calmly. Don't look for a reaction. Just remain. Because that one simple, sincere gesture can awaken something in him no one else has ever reached. His desire to trust again. And when that happens, get ready. Because you won't just be touching a man, you'll be touching what Jung would call his self, his deepest essence. And that's where the real begins. That's where true desire is born. And if you've made it this far, you're not like the rest. Because most people give up when it starts to hurt, when truth shakes their ego or reminds them of everything they've let die inside. But you stayed, you listened, you reflected, And now you're at a crossroads. Keep living and touching life superficially, or dare to touch where it truly matters. No one can force you to awaken. But if anything you heard today resonated deep within you, then you can't unsee it. It's time to honor the ones who never gave up, the ones who still believe they can reclaim their respect, their desire, and their presence. If you're one of them, write it in the comments along with your country. Just 4 words, I love wisdom. That phrase says it all. Because this isn't just about men, it's about you, about how you choose to engage with the world, with your emotions, and with your dignity. I'm Gabriel, and this channel, Home of Wisdom, doesn't exist to entertain you or to tell you what you want to hear. It exists to wake you up, to return the power you've given away to others. Here, we don't speak in empty theories or easy promises. We speak of living with strength, with intelligence, with purpose. Subscribe now if this message stirred something inside you. Not for me, for you. Because joining this community means choosing to wake up, even when it hurts. It means no longer living numb and beginning to move with clarity. Share this video. Someone else may need to hear what you've just understood. And don't leave just yet. This video isn't the end. It's just the beginning. 2 more will appear on the screen. One will show you how to reclaim lost respect. The other, how to set boundaries without guilt. Choose the one your soul needs most right now. Because this conversation isn't over. It's only just begun. Why are there people who, although they have the opportunity to go out, spend time with others, and fill their days with company, still prefer to stay at home? This question sounds simple, but in fact it is a deep mystery of the human psyche. Society often labels such a decision as shyness, laziness, or even a sign of isolation. Yet behind it lies something else, something that Carl Jung understood with remarkable clarity. Loneliness is not always a rejection of the world, but a call of the soul for an inner journey. And imagine that every time you close the door to your room and decide not to go out, you are answering a quiet voice within you. This voice does not seek distraction through noise or crowds. It wants to lead you into the depths of your own being. Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." It is precisely this awakening that begins when you choose to stay at home. Perhaps you have already noticed that the bustle of the streets, superficial conversations or social gatherings drain you rather than give you energy. But when you are alone in your room, you feel relief, calm, something the outside world cannot give you. This feeling of peace is not a coincidence but a message from your psyche, a sign that your soul needs silence to hear itself. What many dismiss as staying at home is in truth a sign of introspection. It is the quiet search for authenticity, a path to self-understanding that not everyone wants to take. For even though going out and having fun may seem more attractive on the surface, the true confrontation takes place in the silence of your own home, the encounter with yourself. And here arises the question Jung invites us to explore. Does this preference for solitude really mean a withdrawal from the world? Or is it a sign that we are coming closer to our essence? Staying at home does not mean, as many think, rejecting the outside world. It means rather returning to yourself. Every time you choose silence over noise, you are in truth opening an invisible door to your inner self. This seemingly simple step has a profound psychological meaning. It means that you dare to walk a path most avoid, because looking inward requires courage. Jung was convinced within every human being exists a vast, mysterious universe. And this universe, full of symbols, images, and memories, can only be explored in solitude when one decides not to go out. It is not about rejection, but about opening to the questions the outside world can never answer. Who am I really? What am I searching for? What is the meaning of my life? The journey inward is uncomfortable. At first, the silence can even be frightening because it confronts us with things we would rather suppress. Repressed thoughts, fears we hide in daily life, feelings we never express. But it is precisely there that the awakening of consciousness begins. Many people want to avoid this confrontation. They surround themselves with noise, distractions, activities that fill time but leave the soul empty. But those who hear the call of introspection understand something essential. To truly know yourself is only possible if you first pass through your inner darkness. Thus, solitude becomes a mirror that shows not only who we are, but also who we could become. Imagine your inner self as a house with locked rooms. Most of the time we live only in one bright room with a view outside. But when you choose solitude, you take the key and begin opening doors you have never entered. In some rooms you find forgotten memories, in others intense feelings, in yet others dreams you had abandoned. This is not an escape from life, but a search for wholeness, for only those who walk through their own inner corridors can grasp the entirety of their being. Jung summed it up in one sentence: your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. And it is in this awakening that the true value of solitude reveals itself, not as emptiness, but as presence. The presence of your soul that finally wants to be heard. There are moments in life when one discovers in solitude a truth that can hardly be put into words. Silence can be more healing than the loudest party, and the calm of your own room can give you more strength than an entire crowd. Staying at home does not mean emptiness, but quiet fullness. The feeling of peace you sense when you are alone is in reality a deep message from your psyche. It is an invitation to pause the outside world for a moment and listen to what is happening within you. Think about it. Haven't you already noticed how exhausted you feel after a day full of people, even if it was full of laughter and conversation? Something in you is tired, drained, as if your energy had been sucked out. But when you spend time alone, in your familiar retreat, you feel your life force slowly returning. This is no coincidence. Your soul knows it needs silence, just as your body needs sleep to regain strength. Carl Jung observed that the human soul always seeks balance. Crowds, social obligations, and constant noise sometimes have their place. But if we remain in that environment too long, we lose contact with what is essential. Solitude acts as a counterbalance, as the other side of the scale, restoring harmony to our lives. In this pause, away from foreign voices, you have the chance to hear yourself clearly. The outside world constantly demands that you be someone for others, fulfill expectations, play roles, respond to demands. But solitude leads you back to your true face, to your essence without masks. That is the peace you feel when you are at home, the liberation from having to perform or prove anything, simply to be. Jung said that the unconscious expresses itself in symbols and subtle feelings, and these signals can only be perceived when the outside world grows quiet. In other words, outer silence opens the door to the inner language. That is why what many experience as boredom when they are alone is in truth often the beginning of a deep dialogue with their own soul. Solitude is not passivity, but an active process, a return to what truly matters. If you feel that relief the moment you close the door behind you, you are not rejecting others but affirming your right to exist in peace. This moment of silence is an act of healing. And here something exciting happens. The more you allow yourself to experience this inner peace, the stronger your ability becomes to deal with the outside world. For solitude does not make you weak, it makes you strong. The calm that arises from silence is the source from which you can later connect with others without losing yourself in them. So far we have spoken about the emotional and spiritual dimension, but what is fascinating is that biology also provides an explanation. Your brain, this infinite network of connections, holds a secret. Every time you grow still and focus on yourself, certain areas switch on and function differently. Neuroscientists have discovered that the so-called medial prefrontal cortex plays a key role in this. This area lights up when you think about yourself, reflect on your feelings, or even when you try to understand the inner world of others. In other words, Self-awareness and empathy spring from the same source. This means something profound. When you choose to stay at home and listen to yourself, you not only learn to know yourself better, but paradoxically also become more capable of connecting with others. Solitude is not selfishness, but a quiet training to better understand life. Carl Jung sensed this truth long before science could confirm it. He spoke of the importance of introspection, of looking into one's own soul to discover who we are. Today, neurobiology shows that this inner journey activates brain networks that help us grow in self-understanding and empathy. Imagine your mind as a calm lake. When you are surrounded by noise and people, the surface of the water is disturbed and you see nothing beneath. But when you choose silence, the water clears and you can look into the depths. There lie your memories, your feelings, your hidden desires. Science calls this neural activity, but you experience it as inner clarity. The most fascinating thing is that this practice of being alone and reflecting strengthens your emotional resilience. Your brain trains in this invisible gym of solitude to better cope with stress, recognize patterns in your emotions, and find meaning in your life. Therefore, when someone criticizes you for preferring to stay at home, they do not realize that your brain is at that very moment working for you. You are not losing time. In reality, you are building new neural connections that help you understand yourself better, and thereby also perceive others more clearly. Loneliness thus becomes a tool of self-knowledge, as powerful as any experience outside in the world. Here, science and psychology meet. What looks like a simple decision, staying at home, being silent, reflecting, is in truth a deep, transformative process. Your psyche experiences it as introspection. Your brain translates it into new connections that shape your way of being. In Jungian psychology, loneliness is neither coincidence nor merely a personal preference. It is the expression of a universal archetype, the hermit. He appears in myths, religions, and traditions of all cultures. The hermit is not a weak figure, nor a coward fleeing from life. On the contrary, he is a wise man who knows that external life is full of distractions, and that one must at times withdraw from the noise of the world to find a deeper truth. In the tarot, for example, the hermit holds a lamp in the darkness. This light is not first for others, but illuminates his own inner path. Jung saw in this an image of the human psyche seeking self-knowledge. The hermit stands for maturity of spirit, for the ability to recognize that silence is not nothingness, but a fertile space in which important insights arise. So, if you unconsciously decide to stay at home, you embody this archetype. You step back to listen, you observe without distraction, you give space to your inner voice. Think of the great sages of history: Moses on the mountain, Buddha under the fig tree, Christ in the desert. All experienced phases of solitude before sharing their teachings with the world. The image of the hermit does not call for shutting oneself off forever, but only for withdrawing enough to hear the inner truth in order to later share it with others. Our modern society, fixated on productivity and constant networking, often views solitude with suspicion. But Jung reminds us, the hermit does not represent weakness, but inner strength. His lamp symbolizes the clarity that arises when one dares to enter one's own darkness. And the fascinating thing, this archetype does not belong only to mystics or sages. It resides in each of us. When you consciously choose solitude, you follow an ancient pattern that has accompanied humanity for millennia. It reminds us that inner life is just as real as outer life. But, and here lies the crucial point, not every solitude is the same. Jung knew there is a great difference between solitude out of fear and solitude out of awareness. The first imprisons, the second liberates. Whoever withdraws out of fear, from judgment, from conflict, or because life outside seems unbearable, does not experience introspection but escape. This kind of solitude becomes a prison that constricts the spirit and drains vitality. It is completely different when you choose solitude consciously. Then it is an act of autonomy, a clear signal. I need to hear myself. I need space to understand who I am and what I feel. It is not a no to the world, but a bridge between inside and outside. like closing your eyes to see more clearly, like silence to finally hear. Jung emphasized that the most difficult task of human beings is to face their own shadow side, the parts of us we would rather repress. And this encounter succeeds only in silence. That is why the conscious choice of solitude is a courageous step. You face your reflection without masks. It is not escape, but confrontation. Not imprisonment, but liberation. One can imagine it like this. Someone who flees out of fear lives like a prisoner in a locked cell. Someone who consciously chooses solitude lives in a bright, open room that he could leave at any time but stays because he knows a treasure awaits inside. Society rarely makes this distinction. It often calls the person who prefers to be alone strange, antisocial, or not adjusted. But in reality, everything depends on inner motivation. The same act, staying at home, being silent, declining an invitation, can be either a sign of weakness or of strength. What matters is whether it comes from fear or from awareness. Here Jung's teaching becomes decisive. He invites us to ask ourselves honestly, do I flee from the world because I cannot endure it? Or do I consciously choose this moment of solitude to find myself? The answer to this question shows not only what kind of solitude we are experiencing, it also changes the way we move through life. For when solitude is consciously chosen, it ceases to be a wall and becomes a bridge into the depth of your being, but also to more genuine relationships with others. Many people think that solitude is a barrier that cuts us off from life. But from Jung's perspective, conscious solitude is not a wall but a bridge that connects the outer world with the inner universe. Their authenticity begins to grow and life gains more depth. When you learn to enjoy your own company, you no longer need to fill every minute with foreign voices or activities. You realize that solitude is not a hole that must be filled, but a fertile ground in which the truest part of you germinates. In the silence of your home, without distraction, you hear the inner voice that has always been there, but often drowned in the noise of everyday life. It is your guide to authenticity, to what Jung called the process of individuation, the path on which every human being becomes what he truly is. Thus, solitude becomes a bridge to your essence. Every minute in silence invites you to observe your thoughts, to accept your feelings, and to reconcile with repressed parts of yourself. And then something special happens. The more you connect with yourself, the more capable you become of truly connecting with others. That is the great secret. Solitude does not separate you from the world, it prepares you for it. Whoever has never learned to listen to himself cannot truly listen to others. Whoever has never learned to find peace in his own presence can hardly give it in a relationship. Conscious solitude thus becomes training for empathy, love, and genuine connection. Jung knew the soul does not grow in noise, but in moments of concentration when we look inward. There our inner life arranges itself, their experiences find their meaning, their wounds begin to heal. Solitude is therefore the bridge that leads us from chaos to order, from confusion to clarity, from the social mask to authenticity. Imagine walking across a suspension bridge that hovers over a river. On one side lies the outer world, expectations, demands, relationships. On the other side, your inner realm, dreams, fears, memories, your true essence. Solitude is the bridge that carries you between these worlds without losing yourself in either. That is why staying at home does not mean turning away from others, but strengthening yourself so that you can later meet the world more clearly, more powerfully, and more authentically. Staying at home is not a sign of laziness or weakness, but a quiet act of awareness, a return to your essence. Solitude is a path, a bridge, and even an ancient symbol in human history. Jung knew, in silence lies the truth that the noise of the world will never reveal. So if someone tells you that you are antisocial because you prefer your own realm, remember, you are following a deeper call, a call of your soul. You are not fleeing from life, you are entering it in the most authentic way. For only one who looks inward can truly awaken. Conscious solitude is not absence but presence, the most important of all, your own. When you learn to be at peace with yourself, when you realize that you can endure and appreciate your own company, you are ready to step into the world with new strength. The message is clear. Your home, your silence, your solitude are not prisons, they are temples. Temples in which your psyche expands, your soul strengthens, and your deepest truth comes to light. Therefore, embrace your moments of solitude as sacred opportunities. Listen to your inner voice and transform every moment of silence into an act of transformation.